Hello everyone, just thought I'd jump on here for a few minutes and do a simple little video here on theology, kind of a thing I noticed that people tend to overlook when they're talking about things like an afterlife, heaven, hell, those sorts of things, divine retribution, judgment day, a reward for a life well lived. Now, let's say, for example, that you believe in the kind of heaven and hell, the kind of afterlife where people who don't follow your God or who do bad things or whatever, they get sent to hell. And the good people, the people who live right, they don't kill anyone, they don't do anything bad, they have no ill will at all, they try not to sin, they beg for forgiveness, and so on. And they go to heaven. Or, both of those sets of people go before God, and God judges them, or his proxy, or whatever. And I got to thinking about this while I was listening to Viced Rhino's recent video. And it strikes me that no one ever thinks about this. But, heaven, for example, is a place where there will be no suffering, there will be no pain, you'll be perfect, and so on. It's a good place to be, you want to be there, because you know, for example, that there are people in hell who have gone there because they've done bad things to you or someone else, or they've violated your God's rule, or whatever. So you get to heaven, you're feeling pretty good, God's let you in, and here's where the difficulty begins. Because the thing is, you can't really end suffering if you're aware that it happened to you in the first place. You can't be perfect if someone did something which was less than perfect to you, or made you in some way imperfect, as far as the Bible or other religious texts describe it. So, it makes me think, God, for example, or the afterlife, wherever you go, maybe you think it's karma, maybe you think it's something else. Maybe you think enlightenment is when you've finally gotten rid of all the pain or whatever. And I wonder, for example, if you're not aware of the bad things that happen to you because God has removed your suffering, and you're in a better place, and no one can hurt you, and you're there forever, you're rejoicing, praising, whatever, and you have no memory of those bad things that happened to you. Why, if you're no longer aware of, let's say, someone ripped you off one time really bad, and, took advantage of you, or did something even more unspeakable, and by removing the transgression, are you still going to remember that you had such an experience? And if so, how can that possibly be heaven if God isn't even going to take away your memory of the bad things that happened to you? I mean, for some people, that's the worst possible thing, is remembering something over and over, even if you did it yourself. There are memes and jokes and comics and songs and poetry and works of art and entire books and catalogs of libraries based on this sort of thing. You don't want the memories of the bad stuff that happened in your past. Cringe videos are a huge thing on YouTube. So I wonder if God leaves your memories intact, or if you have them when you're in whatever you think of as heaven in the afterlife, and alternately, if God takes them away, makes you pure, whole, and perfect, or whatever, then you have no recollection of any bad thing ever happening to you, why would you care about justice in an afterlife, for one? Two, I wonder why God would need to create a hell when realistically, I mean, there wouldn't have to be two different places to send you, because if the afterlife, heaven, whatever, makes it so you can't remember the bad things that happened to you, then you'll never remember, you'll never have actually known, essentially, that Hitler did all the bad things that he did, and so on. So if your God, if your afterlife, if your heaven, your whatever, means that you won't even know about these transgressions, they will have been removed, then why on earth would you believe that there's a hell where people go as far as a punishment for things that no one in such a heaven is even going to be aware of? And that the people like you and I right here, right now, can have literally no way of knowing about. And I mean, the clearest example, if we use an example, for example, that was a good sentence. I like that sentence. But I mean, if heaven and hell are real, why? Like, even if you take canonically, God created the earth or whatever, God created the heaven and the hell and the purgatory and the limbo and whatever your branch of religion is that rewards you for being good and punishes you for being bad. Why would your God have two different places at all? Why would there be two different places? It's not like those people will be able to hurt you in paradise. You won't have any recollection of them doing anything bad to you ever, or to anyone else for that matter. Because again, the memory is part of what makes the whole experience of heaven and hell satisfying, gratifying, positive in the first place. Is the idea that some people aren't going there because God is going to cause them to not be there. So logically speaking, a place like heaven and hell can't really exist together because there would be no need for either of them. You see, that's my logic on that one. It's a point that kind of gets overlooked. I think it's a fun thing to talk about. Because the way I see it, if I go to heaven, I can't be in pain, and so on. I can't be imperfect. Because, you know, I'd be made perfect in such a place. It wouldn't really be heaven if there was, you know, suffering, and so on. So, I want to know your thoughts anyway. Leave a comment down below. Just thought I'd get on and do a real quick little video here, put some knitting in, see if this camera looks any better. I forgot to turn the lights on, so I guess that doesn't really matter. If you want to see more stuff like this, I guess leave a like or something. Get the debate started. Think about it from a different direction in anything you're doing, you see. And you can apply this kind of logic to just, you know, anything in general. But you want to critically analyze every faculty you have. Yeah, that new camera is really nice on this new phone. Alright, sweet. But yeah, that's just something I got to thinking about for a moment there. Someone said something. There we go. I find the idea of heaven preposterous, since it's supposed to be the very idea of perfection. Correct. Don't give a fuck says that. And basically that's my thought too. You can't really have a perfect thing, because the only way you know something is perfect is by the fact that it lacks imperfections. And Don says, perfection as far as heaven is an unobtainable goal. Yes, very much so. Again, if there are not imperfections, then you have nothing by which to judge the finished product as being perfect. Besides, it's kind of like this cloth I'm making right here, whatever it turns out to be. It's just a little sample piece, gauge piece to keep my hands occupied and give you something satisfying to watch while I talk to you here. This is also single crochet, by the way, in case anyone is curious. But, yeah. If I show you this cloth and I say, this is or is not perfect, there's a lot of things I would have to do there to qualify in the first place whether or not it actually was perfect. For example, I could pick out and say it's a cloth that does exactly what I want to. I can set my drink upon it. It will keep the table from warming it up or cooling it down, and so on. And as far as it goes, it is a perfect pot holder. But that doesn't mean it is just abstractly perfect. It just means it's a thing that has no blemishes with regard to a particular criteria. If I say this is the perfect cloth, then I'm also setting a standard that says that any cloth that is not exactly like this is imperfect. And the problem is, I can take this perfect cloth and I can add a few stitches to it. Suddenly it's not the same cloth anymore. Sorry about that. My stream got disconnected for some reason. But no, I mean, Dawn says it could be a perfect cloth for you, maybe so not for me. Right, but I'm saying as an abstract idea, the cloth I just showed you, let's pretend that is the perfect thing. So the question would then become, I'm adding another row to this one right here, and we're putting all these stitches in. Now, I just told you, based upon my own liturgy, pretend that I am God, I am the thing that wrote your Bible, your holy book, or whatever, for a moment. And now I take the cloth that was perfect, and you see, I've added to it. Now, the question is, we already know this part down here was perfect without adding anything to it, without altering it or anything. Is it less perfect now that I've added something to it? So, for example, adding the notions of judgment to people who don't actually know pain because they're in heaven, for example, is this part also perfect because it happens to be attached to this perfect portion? And let's say I say this portion up here, not so good. So that's the sin, and I take it out, right? So now, oh well, thank you for tuning in, Dawn. He says, gotta get to work. I'll catch the rest, my man. Peace out, my dude. But anyway, the point remains, if I say this is perfect, except perhaps for this stitch right here, if I go and remove all the stitches down to that one, let's pretend, and I'm left with this, does that make it perfect just because I removed something from it? I don't think so. It's certainly not the same thing at that point. I mean, yes, the cloth is only this yarn here. And, I mean, this is the thing I just made. It ends right about there. Is this thing exactly as perfect as the cloth I just made with it? I wonder. Does it matter if it's in the shape of a cloth or just in the shape of the string in a loose pile? How can this be imperfect when the cloth I just showed you we determined to be perfect? They're both literally the same thing. They're both a collection of string in some fashion. If I cut this string in half, is it less perfect, even though it's all still there? But if I take part of it off, then how can you say it's the same string? You see, that's the kind of logic you want to engage in when you're thinking about things like heaven, hell, and the afterlife, and do we exist when we're dead, and that sort of thing. Apply that kind of logic to it, and you'll get some very clear answers, I think. Anyway, that's pretty much going to be it for today. And thank you all for tuning in. As always, this has been Reverend JR. Oh, look at that focus. Signing off.